Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. For today's video, I wanted to cover a game that I've mentioned here and there in a few of my other videos. It's a game I've been pretty excited about after first discovering it through content from guys like Big Fry. The game I'm referring to is called World War III, and it recently entered its closed beta stage, which you can pay $15 to access through their website, or you can wait until March 2022 when the game will go free to play. There's a lot out there about World War III's troubled history and the development issues with the Farm 51. I don't want to go too deep into the backstory of this game other than to say it's from an indie developer and it takes aim at AAA titles like Battlefield. To put it out there at the beginning, this game has a ton of potential and I'm enjoying what I've played so far. After the rocky start to the beta with server issues, I was able to get on and play for a while and I left with a lot of optimism, but I also wanted to point out a few issues that I experienced. To start with the good, World War III feels like it takes a lot of the best aspects of Battlefield 4 and Insurgency Sandstorm and puts them together. Those are two games I absolutely love, and I love the way that they've combined the aspects of these games to make this really interesting FPS. Watching the gameplay, you'll see all the inspiration from Battlefield. Everything from HUD customization to combined arms combat, to squad-based play with squad revives and spawning, to a game mode that is essentially Conquest. However, the gunplay feels very reminiscent of Insurgency. Guns have heavy recoil, time to kill is fast if you hit your shots. There are classic tactical shooter mechanics like leaning when taking your shots. On top of these inspirations, World War III takes things further from having far and away the best customization system of any FPS I've ever seen, even beating out the likes of games like Modern Warfare 2019. Operators and guns have rich, deep customization. There's even a mechanic to swap attachments on the fly in-game, much like Battlefield 2042's Plus system, but it has much more depth. There are even choices to make about the amount of armor you wear and the equipment you take with you. The more you take, the heavier your character becomes and the slower you move. Graphically, the game looks much nicer than I anticipated and the visual styling of the maps is surprisingly immersive. Might not tell that this is from an indie developer if I didn't tell you in the first place. It looks pretty good. Movement has some of the arcade shooter features you might expect, like sliding and tack sprinting, but it's balanced with slower tactical mechanics like the inability to shoot while sliding, the inability to shoot while going prone, leaning to get a better look at your target, and a death report that tells you how much damage you took, where that damage was located, and who dealt that damage. There's also even a score streak type system in order to call in things like UAVs for good measure. All of this adds up to a really unique blend of arcade and tactical FPS styles, where you can do some running and gunning if you're smart about it, but you also can't overextend if you want to avoid being quickly dispatched by enemies holding angles. However, with all of this good, there are definitely some issues, and I'll start out with some of the bug and glitch-oriented problems in a sort of rapid-fire fashion. These are things I'm sure the team is aware of already and will likely address as they go along. They're more along the lines of just smaller fixes. Audio in this game is the worst I've heard in an FPS of this caliber. The developers have already acknowledged it as well. Guns sound terrible when you fire them, and they sound even worse when other people fire them. There's no punch or satisfaction to them, and it feels awkward to shoot. Footsteps also sound strange to the point where it's impossible to tell how many people are even making the sound. One character, 5 characters, it sounds the same. With footsteps and gunfire from other players, it's also impossible to accurately determine direction, and at times, it also feels like it's just this sort of stock sound effect that plays, rather than a sensation of players being around you. Sometimes vehicles are also too quiet, and in my time with the beta thus far, I've had multiple times where vehicles drive right up behind me and kill me without me hearing them until they've already fired their shots. Animations also have a ton of jank in some instances. The most noticeable one to me is when throwing grenades. For one, the character's arm does this weird jerky motion when pulling back to throw the grenade, and then when it is actually thrown, it doesn't leave the soldier's hand smoothly, it sort of appears to leave a static position in front of you, and it just looks really awkward. Animations between sprint, tack sprint, and walking often feel clunky and take away from the quickness that the game provides. I've also noticed that when sprint is set to holding the key down in the settings instead of toggling, the character will still get stuck in the sprint even if I stop moving and then start moving again, and I have to do a bit of strafing and crouching to get back into a walking speed. When dropping the health bag on the ground, you have to hold the interact key in order to heal, and this process takes several seconds. However, that progress is shown way far down on the screen, and in tense situations when an enemy might push me, I'd prefer the progress of the healing to be higher up toward the middle so that I can keep an eye on my crosshairs and the healing progress at the same time. Finally, when fighting enemies, there's just way too many things popping up on the screen like it's Call of Duty. Even just hitting an opponent with a bullet causes text and points to pop up, and in heavy firefights, it quickly becomes distracting and the center of the screen becomes cluttered. I wish they'd take even more inspiration from Battlefield here and have a less is more approach, as well as aligning all of this UI feedback to the bottom center of the screen so it's out of the way. That sums up most of the bug or glitch or small fix related things I've noticed. But from there, I wanted to talk about a few design decisions that I really think need some adjustments to really push this game over the top and make it compete with the biggest games on the market. For their conquest style mode, capturing points takes forever, like a crazy amount of time. And with there only being 40 players in the game, it's one of the things that sometimes makes it feel a lot emptier than it needs to be. And with that, the 40 players in this mode is also just too few. I think it needs to be at least 48, maybe even more. A lot of the times is spent just running around trying to find a fight or defending a point from the odd straggling enemy here and there. It also makes vehicles feel a bit out of place. In Battlefield, there are people who can take out the vehicles while other classes fulfill their roles, but in this game, since there are so few teammates, it just feels like vehicles can become much more potent. Team Deathmatch suffers from similar problems. It's only a 10v10 mode and the maps just feel too large. Either make the maps smaller or raise the player count on these maps. If I had to guess, I'd assume these limited player counts are related to World War III's issues with server performance historically. I'd guess they're trying to lighten the load on the servers, but I definitely think it would be better to increase the player counts. On top of that, I really think the game could use more modes. This could just be an issue with the beta, and maybe it will expand as it nears its full release. As it stands now, just having TDM in this conquest style mode gets boring very quickly, and it would benefit from modes that can really change up the way the game is played. Maybe some objective small team mode like a search and destroy type thing would help. From a maps perspective, I have to say that even though the maps have a lot of character, more than I expected, they really lack pacing and flow compared to other games, and I think a lot of this is due to the low player counts. But also navigating them doesn't feel very intuitive. I don't think they do much to promote combat in many areas. Again, this could be alleviated with more players, and maybe some of these dead areas of the maps will have some actual action going on. But for now, it just feels like there's a lot of empty space, and it doesn't feel like it's designed in such a way to promote combat. As a last thing, from what I can tell, it doesn't look like firing an unsuppressed weapon makes you show up on the minimap. I strongly disagree with this. UAVs are really easy to obtain in this game, but it just feels really counterintuitive to have a minimap and then not fill it with information. If they wanted to go this route, I think having no minimap would have just been a better move. And that about wraps up my early thoughts on World War III, but I want to hear from all of you. If you had a chance to play it, if you even heard of it, leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to have a conversation. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to drop a like, and if you didn't, leave a dislike so I know I need to change something. Subscribe if you're new. We have plenty more content coming up. With that, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video.